Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast, the resource for transitional and experienced genealogists who want to create a successful business. I'm your host, Marion Pierre-Louis. Here you'll learn from professionals all around the world who work in the field of genealogy. Are you ready to learn and grow together? Then let's get started. This podcast is sponsored in part by the Association of Professional Genealogists. You can find out more about them at www.apgen.org. Welcome to episode 12 of the Genealogy Professional Podcast. Today we head west to Missouri to chat with genealogist LaDonna Garner. LaDonna, welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast.
Hello, Marion, and everyone listening in.
LaDonna, let's get started by having you tell us about yourself and give us an overview of your genealogy business.
Well, I'm a board-certified genealogist, and I became certified in 2006, so it's been quite a few years now. Enjoy doing genealogy so much that I also went back to college to get a degree in historic preservation so I can stay within the field and talk history and hands-on. My business is Leaf Seeker Consulting, and it's really a well blend of genealogy and historic preservation. So we handle not only just genealogy research and helping everyone build their family trees, but we also look into cemetery restoration and cataloging of headstones and such. But other than that, it's really wonderful to be able to look at everything in a whole, people with buildings and places and landscapes. So I really enjoy it.
What made you decide to become a genealogy professional?
What made me decide was really one day I stopped asking as many questions as I was getting from other people that needed a little bit more assistance. I was helping at a local library in Jefferson County, Missouri, and the librarian was out for illness. So I stepped in part-time, just helping, not on staff, but just as a volunteer. And only a few people at that time knew every document and microfilm reader in the small little genealogy section they had at the time. But people would come in, and the librarians would push them towards me, and I would help them get started on, the microfilm census or some of the books that might help lead to their ancestors that were there in the area at the time period they were looking for. And that's what really got me thinking that I had a different calling other than what I was doing previously, which was in the veterinary field. But that's what really got me moving on where I'm at now as a professional.
I have to catch you on this. You did say microfilm census. Was this a long time ago, LaDonna?
Oh, that was, what was that, 1990s? So
wow.
For me, that's a long time ago. I think some people that are so used to digital images might not understand microfilm on census on microfilm rolls, but that was how you had to do it. You had to sit and hand crank for quite a while, and your eyes got a little burned out from the blurred images, but digitization has really helped quite a bit.
Oh, it sounds horrible looking at census records on microfilm.
I actually enjoyed it. I really did. I kind of still do. I have a microfilm reader in my office here at home that my husband wondered if I would use at the time.
LaDonna, tell me, did you get your CG before or after you started your genealogy business? I
got it after I started. I really wanted to stop what I was doing at the moment. The business kind of fell into my lap. I wasn't working full time, raising 3 children, and I started doing it as a side thing, a side hobby. And what I started seeing was it was going to get ahead of me too fast. And I realized that so many of the older genealogists that have been doing this a long time really wish they'd have had the opportunity to stop, get some type of accreditation or certification, and then go on with their business. So I did have that chance to just take a few years, focus on becoming a professional through certification, and then get back on my shingle there.
Do you think that your work change? Did your business change as a result of the certification?
Definitely. My quality is a lot better. It's more intense and more stable. I'll say stable, meaning sometimes when you're volunteering, we know a few sources you can, lean to helping someone with, but whenever you take that extra step and become a little bit more professionalized, you try to build yourself this tool set of things that you can go to. So I'm a lot more stable for helping other people that way.
Now, many people come to genealogy from another profession. You had mentioned that you were in veterinary services. Can you tell us about that job and any other jobs you might have had before you started your genealogy business?
I am a registered veterinary technician. I still am. I still have a license. I have to take continued education classes every year with the state of Missouri in the United States. And I started out in laboratory science as a laboratory manager, working with chickens and salmonella and E. coli for other animal things. I interned at St. Louis University Medical School, which was wonderful. And then after that, I worked for a couple different small science labs. But I also have stepped into clinical where, it's your most typical thought of cats and dogs and little toy hamsters, things like that. But my love is in laboratory. But since that's so labor intensive and we wanted to have more children, I had to let that go. Can't have a baby in a 70-hour laboratory. So I did step out of that, went more into clinical, and then after a while, I just stayed home more, and I just built up my farm around myself, basically. But I definitely do think that intensity that I missed in the laboratory is what I've probably been putting into the genealogy research. So it's helped me keep my mind a lot sharper where I needed it to be.
What skills do you think you brought to your genealogy business when you started it as a result of having this other experience, and how has it helped you?
Focus. I think that's probably one of the major things I see a lot of researchers lose track of when they're researching. And in laboratory science, you have to stay focused on that particular piece of detail that will give you the result and outcome that you require, to answer. And research for genealogy is so easy to be looking, for instance, at a newspaper, and you're looking for an obituary, and then you come across an ad and, a business mention or some little small town talk. It's so easy to get swept away, and you're sitting there for 3 hours later and realize you did not complete the original question that you wanted to answer. So being able to focus is probably one of the first things that I really have brought from the research in laboratory animal science to genealogy. Another one is just really being able to look at the details in front of you and gleaming that information out. For instance, whenever you are looking at a document and say it's a death certificate, and you're really wanting to know what the person died from, where they died, where they're buried, but you're not looking at all the other information this document's telling you. In research science, you're going to be in laboratory science, you're going to be really looking at all of the results that are in front of you, not just one specific thing, and how they all combine to answer that same question or give it more fulfilling information that you can, grow upon. So your clues. And so those are two things, focusing and gleaming some of that specific detail are two things that I think I bring from the laboratory science avenue.
What skills did you lack when you started your business, and how did you overcome that?
Oh, skills I lacked. Quite a few in the very beginning because I'm pretty isolated here in Missouri. There are just a few professional genealogists that at the time I vaguely knew. And so I was very isolated from resources. Mind you, we did not have all of the internet options that we have today, subscriptions and such, databases. So I was isolated and finally realized I just needed to really branch out and join groups and get more involved as a volunteer. I think that really helped me, one, network, and to be able to understand what other options are out there that I was unaware of. Once I was able to network a little more and internet came into function, then that didn't isolate me so much anymore. So that's been one of the major problems that I've had here in Southeast Missouri was just isolated. I'm out on a farm. I have no neighbors. So it's a challenge, very big challenge.
What was the first group that you connected with to find other genealogists?
It was our small local county group, which was our Jefferson County Genealogical Society. They had just recently formed before I had stepped in. They formed in 1995, and I came in about 1996 or 7. So that was the first one, and I was a lot younger than most of them there. Everyone else were a lot older, retired, and here I was, a young mom, partially working at the time with a couple extra kids and one on the way. So it was a little hard for me to get around, but they were so vital in helping me get on track. The other person that really got me going prior to that was a cousin. She let me know what a census microfilm roll was, sat me down on a microfilm reader, one of the really ancient ones that I don't even think exists anymore. And between that and the genealogy group, that helped me figure out how to really start looking at genealogy in a different light than just my family. And I think that really set some good foundation in starting a business later on.
What was the hardest part of starting a genealogy business for you?
The hardest part of starting the genealogy business, I think, was deciding what I wanted to be able to offer a client or the public. I had to focus on just one thing. Most people come to you with specific issues or roadblocks that they have, and you have to be able to say no. You have to be able to say to this person, I'm not qualified or I'm not prepared to handle that particular area, and feel comfortable with yourself passing it to someone who is better inept at that. So I think that might be an issue with some people who think they have to learn to do it all. I think you really could focus on just a few specific skill sets, especially in the beginning, and really get those honed in very well, and you'd be a lot more successful in whatever you're wanting to create as a business.
I think this is one of the biggest challenges for new genealogy professionals, is that feeling that they have to be able to be good at everything and know everything. And I think as they get more experienced, they realize, oh, I need to specialize in something and I don't need to be expert in other areas.
Exactly.
You want to be expert in methodology, but you don't need, I don't know anything about Missouri. I mean, if somebody asked me to do genealogical research, I would know the methodology of searching in census records and things like that, but I wouldn't know anything specific to Missouri history or anything like that. So I think it's one of the lessons that every single new genealogy professional goes through. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
So it's quite important to know your limitations.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and it's a process to learn that you have to do that. Can you share a specific story of an obstacle or a challenge that you encountered in your career and how you worked around it? And it can be any kind of obstacle. It could be a business obstacle. It could be something happened and you felt really awful about it, and then you had to change how you operated so that you wouldn't be in that situation again. Anything. Share any kind of obstacle that you had.
When you mention obstacle, one of the first things that comes to mind is, one, whenever you decide to get out there and put out your shingle, and you have a specific service you want to offer, to be able to look and see who your consumers are going to be. My local area, it took a little bit for some of them to be comfortable with me as an African American and young, to be able to do their genealogy for them. So it was a little bit of working for myself to realize that I needed to step back a minute and think of exactly how they feel and how I was going to go about offering them something that they did not believe I was capable of doing for them, like a step of faith. One of the things that I can say, trying to get through that obstacle, was being open to some of the issues that are in that particular region or area that you're going to be tackling. in this area, I'm sorry, it's still pretty segregated in certain ways, and I didn't realize the genealogy was. No one had told me that part. But I think I've been able to bridge quite a few of those lines in showing that someone who is pretty versed in certain areas can cross those racial lines and be able to do a good job at those other ethnic groups. So if I'm going to research primarily German Americans here in Southeast Missouri, which we are highly rich in for history, then those people that are going to approach me and realize I am African American have to have a leap of faith. So sometimes what I end up doing was giving them a sample, explain to them verbally on the phone for 30 minutes exactly what we're going to go through, what needs to be tackled in their brick wall. It took a little bit of doing, and it took a lot of patience on my own to really look and see where those fuzzy lines might feel, uncomfortable approaches might be. But I think all in all, it's really helped me just being patient with the person and really educating them on the resources available, my knowledge of them, and how that's going to help and affect their research.
And now, however many years later, what is the comfort level with the community? Because I imagine, it's been a long time now since you started in the 90s.
I get quite a few requests. I have more Caucasian requests for German or French assistance than I do African American. And part of me is happy about that, and the other part of me is sad because I would love to see more African Americans doing their genealogy. But on the other hand, I'm glad that so many of them that are in different ethnic groups than I physically am are comfortable and referring me to other people to do that job.
Do you do any public speaking locally or writing articles or anything like that?
I do a lot of public speaking in the sense of a special interest group for the St. Louis Genealogical Society. I'll do lectures also, and I know I have one coming up here in Milwaukee in a couple of weeks. So that's something I really enjoy, especially since I like talking. That's a really good way to vent genealogy knowledge that I have the time. But I do enjoy doing it for conferences here far and near, and I do enjoy speaking publicly. It's really helped a lot, and it's really helped with expanding the issues of cemetery preservation, which I am really passionate about.
All right, we're going to go into preservation in just one second, but let me just touch on the writing for a second.
Okay.
Are you doing any writing at all? Besides your thesis?
Yeah. I do have a couple writing projects in the works. One writing project is writing about the history of the Black community that's here in Jefferson County, and it's really hard to research. Very little written information survives today. And another one is just generically writing on what's available in Southeast Missouri for genealogy research. Those two are a couple writing projects that have been sitting on my desk, getting a little more dusty than I intended to, but I'm really eager to get started on those here within the next 30 days.
All right, let's talk a little bit about this preservation side of you, because this is very different. Most genealogists that I talk to for this podcast and most genealogists that I talk to in general don't follow an academic course in preservation. Many genealogists, of course, are interested in preservation, but you've actually gone after a master's in preservation. Tell us a little bit about the thought you had in pursuing that, your interest in doing that, and what exactly preservation entails for you. You mentioned cemeteries. I think it's also historic houses. What exactly is this side of preservation for you?
For me, historic preservation concerns the things that are significant to our lives that are now aging, possibly even forgotten or even lost. So I like to focus on landscapes, cemeteries in particular. I enjoy house histories, but I also like having it come full circle, because I think if you separate genealogy, which is the people, with the landscapes architecturally or cemetery-wise, then you kind of missed something. So I am quite different going academic-wise instead of maybe history. A lot of people get a degree in history, come into genealogy. I did the reverse because I love history, but it has to make sense to me. I have to be able to put my hands on it and understand it. And if it's not available, I have to be able to dig it out. So for me, cemeteries is very passionate. I believe that those who've gone before us can tell so much, even though a lot of times the common person has not been written, for instance, like a historic person like George Washington or somebody like that. But there's a lot of information that can be gathered between houses and landscapes that really help fill those voids that we don't find in genealogy.
Can you give us a couple of examples of that?
Well, a great prime example is if you look at a cemetery and you see headstones, you'll be like, oh, okay, a lot of genealogists go and transcribe them, and we have a list, and we can index that and get that out there for people to research. They know where their family members are buried. Well, I would go a step further and look and think, okay, let's look at this community that's buried in this old cemetery on the outskirts of town, most likely. And I'm going to look at those headstones and think, oh, out of these 100 headstones, how many were infants? When did these infants pass away? Was it during an epidemic of like cholera or the Spanish flu? Those tell me a lot more things about that community. If there was a lot of infant mortality, they could have been a more poor community, did not have proper resources to keep themselves more healthy. If there was less infant mortality, it might show that the community really banded together and really was able to get past a lot of those issues that other larger cities, fell under. So there's a lot you can really get from a community that really tells you more about what your family was involved in at the time of their lives.
And what can we tell from a house?
Oh, houses are wonderful. They kind of speak to you. Houses kind of evolve over time. You don't want a house that really sits in one time period because that's not even realistic. A house built in 1900 that's still here today has probably had 3 generations, if not more, people living in that home and putting their impressions into that house, either by the fads that were going on the style of the home, what that person's own personal choices were to reflect into that building. They come back at you. And I really think they kind of influence what was happening at the time period, and it really shows. And it gives you a little bit more idea of the person's personality within that house. It sounds weird, but it really does show.
Do you imagine that a client could come to you and utilize both your genealogy and your preservation services, or are they two different sides of your business?
They're not two different sides. Houses weren't built without people, and people weren't, living without having a home. So they can definitely utilize both sides of my business, genealogy and preservation, by coming to me and seeing exactly, how that fits into their research.
What has been the most challenging aspect of being a genealogy professional from a business point of view?
I think maybe it's really just maintaining clientele, finding a unique way to put yourself out there and being noticed, not just by clients, but also by other professionals who may likely refer you when they aren't able to provide a particular service. That might be more of a challenge because I think sometimes it becomes a hermit type of a career, and you really want that outreach and that network. I help you, you help me, we all help everyone. If we don't become a hermit, then I think it can really expand your business a lot better.
How do most clients find you? Are they finding you through your website, from referral, from face-to-face meetings? How do they find out about you?
The past few years since I went back for another degree was really, I think the primary way most people found me was either through me speaking publicly at a conference or a class even, and then also word of mouth.
How do you balance your time between paid work versus volunteering?
Oh, man, that's hard. You will get tons of unpaid or pro bono requests. That's a given. And being able to decide how much you're going to focus on each. I think at the beginning of every year, I sit down in January and I decide how much I'm going to do every year. So I might do 5 pro bono conference lectures a year, presentations. And then that way I'll be able to juggle so many clients per month. So if you can think on that route, at least once a year, just pre-decide what you're going to do and stick with it. And it's okay. People will understand if you cannot take on another, project or another paid client. It's okay to say that.
What is the most fun project you've ever worked on that you can share with us?
Most fun project. I think it was one where, and it was a short project, but it was neat. It was a lady decided she wanted to start researching her family in Louisiana. She does not live there anymore. And her great-grandmother and great-aunt were orphaned. Now, orphan research is not one of my venue, but knowing skill sets, I let her know in advance that was not something that was right in the top of my toolbox, like cemetery research. But if she was agreed, I would love to tackle it with her. Well, what we decided was to go ahead and look at the orphanages, because that was one of her questions, where were they an orphan and held? When were they placed in the orphanage? And when did they leave the orphanage? Now, some of that information is sealed under court documents, so she'll have to go another route to get some of those answers. But what we did decide to do, which is why I thought it was fun, was I looked at all of Louisiana around Baton Rouge, where her family was last known to be, and we decided let's see orphanages were there at the time period of her great-grandmother and her great-aunt. We were able to single out those particular orphanages. Then we went on to see what records were surviving that were publicly made. So we went and we found quite a bit of documents that existed for a few of these orphanages, and then also which orphanages still existed today. That might not sound fun for a lot of people, but I found it fascinating. There was an avenue that was not as familiar to myself, which is probably why it was fascinating. And 2, it really made me look at that family structure of why these 2 young girls were given away at the age of 5 and 8 by their mother. Well, their father had passed away. The mother tried to work as a housemaid or cleaning laundry. We're not quite sure. But she did do some domestic work. And she was still not able to handle these girls. She did find another man and decided to get married, but he did not apparently want the children. So she placed them in a home. So that's fascinating, and the fact that we were able to look at and give the researchers a little bit more information on how to get through this roadblock for something that's so private and closed and not always talked about.
Well, that's neat. I think many of us have ancestors that were in orphanages, but it's not one of the topics that you hear about often. So that's really cool. Let's take a quick break to hear a message from the Association of Professional Genealogists.
Hello, this is Kimberly Powell, President-elect of the Association of Professional Genealogists. APG is an international membership organization dedicated to supporting all individuals in the business of genealogy, whether you're an archivist, librarian, educator, writer, or researcher. Our 2,600 members include genealogists at all stages of their professional careers, from those just starting out to some of the field's most renowned leaders. Learn how to grow your business and network with other professionals through our educational webinars, informal mentoring groups, active discussion lists, the APG Quarterly, and our annual Professional Management Conference. Visit us online at apgen.org to learn how we can help you on your professional journey and how you can help us advance public awareness and understanding of the profession of genealogy.
All right, LaDonna, we are about to enter the lightning round, and I am going to hit you with a bunch of rapid questions, and you are going to come back with brilliant answers that are going to provide wonderful advice for all the genealogists out there. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What was the one thing you were most afraid of in starting your business?
Talking to people in person.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Don't try to pass your board certification application. Try to strive to be your best.
Excellent. Great advice. What is one specific action listeners can take in the next 24 hours to help them transition into a genealogy career?
Take advantage of local or state or even online business management courses. A lot are webinars, a lot of are in PDF forms or booklets.
Do you have a productivity tool or an app like Dropbox that you love that you can share with the audience?
One of my favorites, and it's a little pricey if you can afford to get it or something similar, is Adobe PDF. Clients love their items digitized now, and if you're out hand researching and they want everything digital, I will send them scans, nice quality and size so they can replicate them at home off their own printer. But I will put everything into a nice PDF format, and it's readily available for them to share, and it goes completely across all computer mediums.
Let me ask you a technical question. Do you put your citations on your documents, or do you add them as notes when you're creating the PDF?
I put them on the document.
Okay. Because I've heard that some people, there's a notation feature in PDF. I haven't done it myself, but that you can actually do it that way as well.
Yeah, I don't trust it. So I put it on the document.
What is your preferred social media channel?
Facebook.
If you could recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be?
A Graveyard Preservation Primer by Lynette Strandstad.
That's a great selection. Okay, here's a hypothetical scenario for you. You have to move across the country, and I'm going to say that you have to move to Boston because we've got lots of old houses and old cemeteries.
Yay.
So you don't know anyone there. You're going to pretend I'm not here, and you're not familiar with the research or the record groups in that new location. What are you going to do in the first month to hit the ground running and start a new genealogy business?
First thing I do is I network any local societies, historical, preservation, genealogical, and I get involved.
What would you do after that?
I go to the local courthouses and I start looking through the land deed records, and I learn the area and the plat maps.
Great. Give our audience one parting piece of advice and then tell us how we can get in contact with you.
Overall, whatever level of genealogy you want to do and whatever aspect you want to focus on for your business, I say you go for it, no matter who tells you you can't, no matter who looks at you like you're crazy, because it all works out. I forgot, what was the second question?
How can we get in contact with you?
Oh, contact me. You can find me, if you're not on Facebook, at leafseeker.com. That is my website. And more than welcome to email me anytime.
And I will have all the links to LaDonna's website and everything in the show notes for this episode. LaDonna Garner, thank you so much for coming on the Genealogy Professional Podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Marian. It's been so wonderful.
Well, in today's visit to Southeastern Missouri, we learned a lot from LaDonna Garner. We learned about the isolation that exists in genealogy. She experiences it physically in her environment in that there isn't a large population where she lives. But I think many genealogists experience isolation when they are working by themselves from their own office, and they don't always come into contact with a lot of other people unless they get out to do research at archives and stuff. We also learned from her about the obstacles and the friction that she faced when she reached out beyond her own community to try to do genealogical research for a different ethnic group and how she overcame that. We learned about her passion for cemetery research and house history research. And not as many genealogists utilize that as part of their services, but it's something to consider if you have a passion in that area as well. LaDonna felt that maintaining a clientele and finding a way to uniquely put yourself out there was one of the hardest parts of genealogy. In her advice for you, she said, go for it. No matter who tells you you can't. and who looks at you like you're crazy. I think all of that formulates a perfect action item this week. And what I would like you to consider are the obstacles that are facing you in your business. And I want you to write them down and make a list. What are the obstacles that you're facing? Is it that little voice in your head that's telling you can't do it? Is it a very real voice outside of your head, like a spouse or a parent or a sibling that's saying, that's crazy, you can't become a professional genealogist. That's not a career that you should follow. Is that an obstacle that you're facing? Do you have the obstacle of being, well-versed in one area of expertise, yet the community that you live in is a different base, maybe a different ethnic base, or maybe geographically you are more familiar with a different state and you've recently moved to a new state. What are the obstacles that you're facing? I want you to write all these down, everything that you've told yourself as an excuse as to why you can't do a genealogy business. Write everything down, whether it's inside or from another person or just logistical issues or educational issues. Maybe you feel like you can't become professional because you're not certified. Write all the things down that are keeping you from starting your business or keeping you from pushing yourself further in your business, and then tackle each obstacle one at a time on that paper and figure out how are you going to address that issue and how are you going to work around it. LaDonna gave us some great advice when she talked about helping the community become comfortable with her doing their genealogical research. And I think there's a great message that we can all take from that and how we can help to educate any potential client to become comfortable with our services. So that's what I want you to think about. Write down those obstacles and then figure out a way how you're going to get around them. So long for now. Until next week.